I've got a friend now that goes to my church, actually, that's, he can't even watch the recent George Floyd stuff because it's a reminder of how the police over here have treated him. And like, he's been battered by the police, choked out and stuff like that. Like, and I've seen it, I've seen it myself, and I've heard so many stories from real, you know, close friends. My cousin's cousin died in police custody over here. Adrian McDonald was tasered several times. The police weren't charged. And there's so many, I think people think it's just in America, but it happens so much here. Like, the attitude for a lot of black people here towards the police is, we don't really like them, in the sense of, because of our treatment, because of racial profiling. Like, we're not, often when we're stopped, it's not even explained to us. And in the midst of, if we were, put it this way, which I don't agree with rioting or looting or anything like that, but if black people was to go out in Manchester rioting and looting or whatever else, but there were white people as well, like, we know that it's the black people that are going to get targeted and going to get arrested and that kind of thing. And just from our own experience, because we've been in situations where, you know, even my brother was saying he was at a party once and the police came in and singled him out. He'd not even done anything. He was like, I think one of the only black guys there singled him out, and everyone else was white. And it's just, how do you not, because I guess people say, oh, you've got a chip on your shoulder. Even that phrase stems from racism, that actual phrase. If you look further into that phrase, it stems from racism. But how can you not feel a certain way when you're constantly treated that way? Now, I could easily be bitter from my experiences and just be like, you know what, I don't like these people, I don't like those people or whatever. But the love of God, of course, and just the approach that I have is like, I can't be like that. And even in this time, for people that don't know about racism and don't really understand it, but are willing to understand, I'm willing to have those conversations with them. But those are just, I guess, some of my experiences. A lot of the name calling stuff, but a lot of it is covert as well. I think there's a lot of undercover stuff, especially in this country. I think I think you start to see it with some of the political parties, and you had the BNP and all that stuff, and, you know, the Tommy Robinson stuff, and a lot of it deep down stems from racist views when you break it down. But I guess experiencing it, what I've experienced and what I've seen and what my friends have seen, like, we know that. And I guess for us, what breaks our heart is having those conversations with our children, you know, that from an early age. It's just like, it's happened, you know, I mentioned my stepdaughter, she's 9 years old. It happened to her last year in school. You know, a kid said to her, oh, I don't want to play with you because you're brown. And obviously some of it is learned behavior, because it's just, funnily enough, I started doing youth work in the area where I went to school, and some of the kids had racist views, but then I knew who some of their parents were, and I started to realize a lot of it was learned behavior, because you're not born racist. It has to be taught, it has to be, and sometimes it's the lack of education, is the lack of, because I understand if you've never really been around black people and you live a middle class life or upper class life, and it's just you've never had any friendships or any engagement, any relationships with any black people, then it's probably the whole concept of being black and what that means is probably foreign to you. And I understand that to an extent, but then it's not the responsibility of black people to educate you as such. It's just, whenever there's injustice, you should feel compelled to want to do something about it, especially as a Christian. That's what I believe anyway. So hopefully that explains it, well, give you a glimpse of some of the experiences that I've had.
That's so good. It's not good, but
no, I know what you mean.
It's good to, just any time I hear stories like that, a black person's experience, it just shocks me to the core, because like you were saying, it is so foreign to my experience. But what particularly struck me was two things. Firstly, when you were talking about people using the word black in front of an insult, as if that sort of adds a weight to the insult, as if it makes it more insulting that I've said your skin colour. And it's so strange because, you know, I'm 31 and I've never once been profiled in any way for the colour of my skin. It's never come into an insult, you know, it's never come into a discussion about my character. It's never been brought up by the few encounters that I've had with the police. Just never been. And what I'm trying to get across, particularly in this message today, is like with people like yourself, there's almost, and having to explain it to your kids, that's horrifying.
Yeah.
You know, and there's almost, I want people who are watching this to be shocked and to actually understand that there's people growing up, living in our country, close to us, friends of ours, who on a daily basis are having to answer for the colour of their skin, are having to be confronted by the colour of their skin when it just shouldn't. It's just not part of the conversation. It doesn't make any difference, you know. And so I wanted to ask you, because, and the second thing is just the amount of pain that you're having to carry as a black person compared to the amount of pain that I'm having to carry, because life is hard enough. You know, you know, your family members die, work is hard, education is difficult, you know, that you see things on the news, you're in lockdown, you know, and then having to have the added pressure of, you know, racist, you know, ignorant, hateful experiences that you've had in your life, on top of everything else. The level of pain that a black person has to carry adds even more weight to the fact that we should be talking about it, because as a Christian, as church, we should be addressing the pain of society and community. We should be bringing healing. You know, God sent a healer, Jesus. We should be enacting what Jesus would be doing, which is healing, bringing a word of encouragement, bringing purpose. So I just wondered, I mean, you kind of touched on it already, but I just wondered if briefly you could just share maybe how you feel the gospel kind of fits in all of this. Some people might say racism is a sin issue, but you know, I wondered from your perspective, how do you feel the gospel, you know, Jesus, what he's done for us, how that fits into all this?
Yeah, sure. Before I speak about that, can I quickly say that what you have to understand as well, to give people a wider perspective, I guess, is that there's a lot of black people that don't feel comfortable sharing their experiences because it hurts too much. That it's for, like, as I say, for so long they've buried it. One of my friends has to have counselling because of it, and so not everybody wants to share it or feels comfortable, I guess, in sharing it. I feel like I have to take a stand for the next generation also, not just for my generation, but for the next generation, because I know what it's like to be a scared kid, and scared of the world because I'm black, because you know that the world is going to view you a certain way, because you know that it's embedded and ingrained in society. Because this is, and I won't go off too deep into this, but what you have to understand systematic racism. You have to understand that. And this isn't the thing is, I think this makes a lot of people uncomfortable, especially white people, because when I talk about even white privilege and stuff like that, like, no one's saying, right, oh, you know, you're a better person because you're white, or you think you're better. It's not an accusation. This is actually something that all of us believe to be a fact. Now, people will argue it and say this and say that. And what I suggest before I forget, Billie Eilish put it really well, you know, the singer. I mean, she was swearing in the thing. So if you fake art, then, you know, take a bit of time. But she put it from the perspective of a white woman, a white entertainer, really, really well, to break down what white privilege is, what Black Lives Matter means. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that later on. But the point I wanted to make about systematic racism is that both the United Kingdom and America, our economy was built on the back of black slavery. You first have to understand that. And you can say, oh no, it's not. These are facts. You can look at history and you can see that. You can see when the slave trade was abolished. You can look at William Wilberforce and the people that the people that fought to get that abolished. But in order to understand that, you have to understand then how the economy was developed. Now, the economy originally, the system, if you want to say that, was created to favor rich white men, both here and America. Yeah. And obviously America, you have the native Indians, and that, you know, they have the native land that they stole as well. But you have to understand that the system was originally created to favor and benefit rich white men. And not much has changed really. And as far as the elite and the positions of power, I'm not saying there's no black people like fighting for those positions and that, but it's always been a struggle to get to those positions. But if the very system and foundations of the system haven't really changed that much, we're not in slavery days, of course we're not even after the time of the abolishment of slavery, but there's some of the fundamentals that they've kept, that means that the system is pitted against a lot of black people. Doesn't mean that black people can't succeed as such. It just means that we have to try harder. Even when it comes to certain jobs, we'll be looked over because of our skin color. It's nothing to do with credentials. It's nothing to do with, there's also the other stuff of, you know, you can often be painted as the angry black man. Like, and this isn't a diss, but I think I got put in that category when I worked at the Message Trust. This isn't a diss at all. I'm just very honest. And most of the time I'd be laughing, but it's just people's lack of understanding and not even taking the time to get to know me as a person. You're automatically putting, I'm passionate about a lot of stuff, but I've never, I don't even think in my history as a Christian, just gone at someone for no reason or been out of line in that area. Does that make sense? So yeah. You have to start to understand the roots of systematic racism and where that comes from and why we are where we are. Because with slavery, I guess black people were treated as property, as less than animals, if you want to say that. And I still think with authorities, the mentality is like that now, both here and America. Like, not here, it's not as extreme as America, I'll admit that, but it still happens. There still is systematic and institutional racism.
I was saying to, because I was telling my mum today that I'm going to talk about this. Yeah. And I try and make a lot of people aware, and I do it with the war as well. You know, racism was only abolished 100 or so years ago. So in the grand scheme of history, that wasn't a long time ago.
Do you mean slavery, sorry? Or
so
you say racism?
Say again?
Did you say racism or slavery was only
slavery. Slavery.
Yeah.
So, okay. and formally abolished, like as in somebody signed a piece of paper. Yeah. That, so in the grand scheme of history, 100 years isn't that long. Mm-hmm. You know, and you know, if you think about something like World War II, only finishing 70 years ago, it's not actually that long. So we're still dealing with, I don't think a lot of people would you know, disagree with the fact that we're still dealing with the effects of World War II, fatherlessness, alcoholism. You know, a lot of that stems from the fact that millions of men in this country went off to war and died. And a lot of people were left without fathers, and that systemic line is threaded through into our society. So it's no less radical to say that actually 100 years ago, people were belligerent, you know, complicit, you know, racist. And me and my wife watched a film not so long ago about somebody who was discovering rainforests in South America. And he was going back to the British Parliament, and they were all and he was trying to say these indigenous people in South America were actually quite intelligent and they'd made inventions, and everybody was shouting savages to him, savages. And I was like, this film was only set 70 years ago. So British Parliament had this view of people who weren't like them as savages. So, you know, I think, you know, but I understand systemic racism more, and I think you're right. I think people should look into it.